I don't think you can separate Parliament from everything else that's happening in society.
Good afternoon and welcome to the officials of the Ministry of Finance, the Auditor General's Department, the Personnel Department, the Office of the Prime Minister, and the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications. Welcome to the members of the media and to the listening and viewing audience. I am Bridget Anisette George, the Chairman of the Committee of the Public Administration and Appropriations of the Parliament. The Committee of Public Administration and Appropriations has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 22nd public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to commence its inquiry into the processing of payment of pensions and gratuities to retired public servants and contracted employees. The committee is desirous of hearing from the relevant stakeholders to discover further challenges being faced by the agencies involved in the process and which has influenced the process. The committee hopes that this meeting will be fruitful and shall provide workable solutions for the improvement of the processing of payment of pensions and gratuity. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email to parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and Twitter @ttparliament. I will therefore now invite the representatives from the agencies and departments present here today to introduce themselves, and maybe we could start with the Auditor General's Department.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lauralee Pujadas, Deputy Auditor General, and I have walked with me today with my team. My team is Ms. Nicole Coburn, Senior Legal Officer. Behind me, I have my Director of HR, Ms. June Bell. I also have two of our major officers that who function in our pension unit that facilitates the computations and the verification of computation for retiring officers. And they are Ms. Devika Sanka and Ms. Kisunde Rampasad. Thank you.
If I may be forgiven, I didn't mention the Comptroller of Accounts, and therefore, to make up for that omission, may I invite the Comptroller of Accounts and the representatives from that department to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members. I am Catherine Laban, Comptroller of Accounts of the Treasury Division, and behind me is Mrs. Vashti Maraj, Director of Pensions.
Thank you very much. And Ministry of Public Administrations and Communication.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. Claudel McKellar, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications. I also have with me Mrs. Laura Daniel, our Director, Human Resources. Thank you.
The Chief Personnel Officer.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. I'm Angela Sinisui-Gervais, Chief Personnel Officer. And I have with me Ms. Juliet Gonzalez, Director, Benefits Management Division. Thank you.
The Ministry of Finance.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the public. I am Michelle Durham-Kisoon, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. Thank you.
And the Office of the Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, everyone. Maurice Sweet, Permanent Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sweet, I left you for last because I figured if we put it in reverse order, you'd still be on top. And therefore, can I invite the members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting at my right.
Yes. Good afternoon to all. Wade Mark, member.
Good afternoon. Daniel Duki, member.
And the committee is today ably assisted by its secretary, Ms. Kiba Jacob, and by our graduate research assistant, Mr. Brian Lucio. Okay, so that what I think I would like to do to start off the conversation is, I guess, to do some table setting, particularly for the committee and the members of the public, to get a sort of understanding of the role that each of the several ministries or departments play in the whole process of computation and payment of pensions. So maybe we could start with the Chief Personnel Officer and then the Ministry of Public Administration, and then, we'll then provide some further order. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Personnel Department is responsible for determining and advising on pay and terms and conditions of employment for a wide range of persons in the public service. Through consultation and negotiation with the appropriate recognized associations and unions, the department determines terms and conditions for monthly paid officers of the civil service, teaching, police, fire, prison services, and statutory authorities subject to the Act. The department is also responsible for the determination of terms and conditions of employment for daily rated workers and contract employees. So we are responsible, as I said, for determining the terms, and our role would really be making sure everyone is aware what their salaries and terms are, both for public officers and contract employees.
Thank you very much. And then, therefore, if I can ask the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications to let us know what their role is.
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Public Administration's role, I might want to describe it as incidental, in the sense that our role as a ministry has to do with public service transformation and reform, policy development, service delivery improvement, so that our input is one that would assist ministries and departments, general line ministries and departments, as well as those who play a more direct role in the pensions process to improve their processes, to introduce policies that would facilitate improvement, to assist them in developing their systems so that they could be more efficient. There is a bit of a more direct role that we play in that when ministries and departments are desirous of, should I say, revisiting their structures, whether they want to introduce additional position staff, they must come through the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications, its Public Management Consulting Division, the PMCD, for review and comment on those structures and new positions before they are submitted to Cabinet for approval, particularly with respect to contract positions and also with respect to established positions. Yes.
Thank you. Could I then therefore ask the Ministry of Finance what their role is?
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Finance is mainly responsible for policy development as it relates to pensions, and provides support for projects and programs that will improve pensions administration and of course the allocation of financial resources. Thank you.
Okay, the Office of the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Well, in respect to what we're currently discussing, which is the contract gratuity and pension, the Office of the Prime Minister would really be a facilitative role, because the actual implementation would be the Ministry of Finance, with, of course, the input of all the other ministries and departments. And the Ministry of Finance is the one who would really issue the circulars and the directions in terms of the preparation of the pension leave records, etc., that will help in the computation of the pensions. So the Office of the Prime Minister is really there in terms of liaising with the different ministries and departments in terms of facilitating the process. Thank you.
And the Office of the Auditor General.
The role of the Auditor General, Madam Chair, is basically enshrined in the Civil Service Act, Section 33.2, that is the regulation, Section 33.2. And in conjunction with the Comptroller of Accounts, our role is basically that of a verification process of the computation that has been done. In this regard, it is being done before compensation has been determined and before compensation has been paid. So in a sense, one can say that it's a pre-verification of the compensation to be disbursed. Also, our additional roles have been enshrined in the Fire Service Act, the Education Act, the Police Service Act, which replicates the Civil Service Acts almost word for word. That is basically our role.
Thank you. And the Comptroller of Accounts.
Thank you. The Pensions Management Branch of the Treasury Division is responsible for the administration of pensions and gratuities and or terminal benefits, and to the retired public officers and also to contract officers. It also includes the calculations in most instances and verification of these payments and the making of these payments.
All right, so thank you, everyone. So this leads me to ask, and the Auditor General had sort of positioned their role within a very specific regulation, which was 33.2. And therefore, I would want to ask, which agency is charged with the responsibility under Regulation 33.1? And for the purposes of keeping the listening public engaged in the conversation, Regulation 33.1 says the computation and authorization of pensions and gratuities of persons whose retirement from the civil service is known to be impending shall be treated as urgent matters of high priority. Who is responsible for this?
It will be dispersed across ministries and departments, because the calculation of the pensions would flow out of the management of your HR. And the management of the HR is really dispersed throughout the service in terms of the Service Commissions Department, the individual HR departments within ministries, HR divisions within ministries and departments, as well as in addition, the accounting units that prepare the pension and leave records that are submitted to the Comptroller. So you have the Comptroller responsible for the actual preparation of the payments and processing, etc. But it's a very systemic process involving all the ministries and departments.
And therefore, Mr. Sweet, you might be in a position to answer. Do all the ministries and departments and the HR units and the accounting units recognize that they all have a role in the discharge of this statutory obligation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so therefore, if all of them have this understanding that the obligation must be what they say, urgent and of high priority, can you say that it is handled in such a manner to reflect urgency and high priority?
I would say yes, but there are constraints to implementing it. And I think a lot of it has to deal with, first begin, the way the system is designed to begin with is a complicated system in terms of the computation, of the process by which you do the computation to determine your gratuity and pensions. Also the fact that the system, it's dispersed in terms of you have to rely on so many different factors. And it goes back to your very first question, who is responsible? And then the answer is the Service Commissions Department, the Comptroller of Accounts. You know, you can't have 3-4 persons being technically responsible, and they all play a different part in it. And you have the Auditor General would have referred to several different acts that govern the various calculation of pensions, and you have persons who, in the course of their career, may actually move from, let us say, the public service to the teaching service, so they're crossing. So the system itself is a complicated.
What the public will be asking when you say that, right? Who is the system? Okay, but you would accept that any system that is designed for anything would have its kinks, its deficiencies, okay? But the point I'm trying to ask is, the agencies, the departments, are each of them aware that their role, regardless of what their deficiencies are, their role is to ensure that pensions are treated as matter of urgency and high priority?
And yeah, I think the answer to that question I'd indicated was yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. Now, when I asked in terms of, and I'm asking you this as head of the public service, when I asked in terms of your role, I was a bit concerned with respect to the role of permanent secretaries, all who come under you, and heads of departments who are charged with a responsibility of ensuring that particulars of service and of pay of all officers whose retirement is known and imminent are furnished accurately to the Comptroller of Accounts. And to really ask whether you're satisfied that permanent secretaries sufficiently understand that they are also charged with that duty and obligation.
I would say yes, again. There are circulars that come out of the Ministry of Finance indicating just that and reminding of the setting deadlines for the specific parts of the process that needs to be met. So I would think that there's a general understanding and appreciation of the importance upon it and the impact it has on the lives of individuals.
Is there compliance?
And the compliance, I would say there was not complete compliance. And again, because of some of the challenges that you would have, I mean, I can go into some of them, but I don't know if you want to go into that part at this point in time.
But the point I'm trying to make is that you have an obligation by statute that 3 months prior to the retirement, you're supposed to fulfill these obligations. Is there compliance with that?
Okay, and again, probably if I could give by way of example, in terms of determining someone's pension and gratuity, you have to look at the entire number of completed months of service. And for that, you basically span the life of that public servant within the service. And that person may have moved through several ministries and departments over that 30 to 35-year period that they were employed. So, and you as the final person, final ministry where that person is retiring from, you're responsible for their pension and leave record at that point in time. And let us say, even if you're in compliance with it and you send it forward to the Comptroller of Accounts, they are looking at parts that predated before they even came in the ministry, and they make gaps may be missing in between. So even though you may have compliance at today, you may not have had compliance 20 years ago, and that impacts upon what's happening now. And that's why I said it's because of the way the system is designed, it becomes complicated.
Yeah, but I understand that. But what I'm saying is this. You have a duty to ensure. That's what the statute says. You have a duty to ensure that 3 months prior to the retirement date, that the particulars of service and payment of the officer is sent to the Comptroller of Accounts. Having regard to the fact that, okay, you may know, I will expect that somewhere in your ministry, you have some record, even if it's the record of when the person first came to you. That informs you, if you know before, that, listen to me, their retirement day is the 1st of August, 2018. If you start that process 3 months before then, to acquire the information, you might really be out. Okay, because, as you say, you may not have anticipated how much you would have to research in back records. So what prohibits a design, because it's going to be particular to each ministry and maybe even particular to each employee, from a permanent secretary knowing beforehand who is going to retire and what they need so that they could meet this 3-month deadline. Simple, like traffic. I may know at 6 o'clock in the morning, it takes me 15 minutes to get to Port of Spain. So I leave home 15 minutes before the designated time. But I know if it's peaked up traffic time, I'm not leaving 15 minutes. I might leave 2 hours earlier just to make sure I'm there on time. So we're talking about systems. Systems are designed for circumstances. What prohibits permanent secretaries from taking, even if you want to call this preemptive action, having regard to all that is required to be done to meet that 3-month cutoff point?
Well, it actually begins long before that 3-month period. I mean, I would probably leave the Comptroller to give more details, but there have been various initiatives that I would use for now, where they've targeted officers in different age groups, where we're trying to bring the P&L records up to date and really looking like 5 years before for the first set of officers in that 55 to 60 age group, and then working back to the 50, 54, and then trying to bring the others. So it's not like you sit and wait till the final 3 months. So that's...
Okay, so having regard to what you've said, I want to ask this of the Comptroller then. In terms of, I think also that there is a statutory duty for the Comptroller to almost, I would say, like, have a duplicate copy of records with respect to each officer in the public service. Does that exist?
First of all, the preparation of pension and leave records should be a continuous effort. So we do ask ministries and departments to prepare the person's records and submit to us in a timely manner so that we can keep it on the officer's file. This isn't always done promptly, so close to the officer's retirement, they would prepare the records and then send it to us.
So might I ask what a timely manner means in terms of if you're giving to me an instruction, what would a timely manner mean?
Possibly every year, prepare that person's record of service and submit. So we would.
Okay, so that's supposed to be done for every public officer.
Yes.
Therefore, what has been the Comptroller's experience with respect to compliance with that, and what has the Comptroller done to ensure compliance that every year these, I would call them returns, are made?
Well, no, there hasn't been full compliance, but we have undertaken several efforts to ensure that there is. We issued a circular last year in December reminding permanent secretaries and heads of departments of their responsibilities to ensure that these records are submitted on time. Additionally, we met with ministries. We had a training with ministries and departments in March this year to also emphasize the point and train them also in certain areas that they need to prepare certain records and have it ready for us. Additionally, we are also intending to talk to the permanent secretaries in May as well, to go through the process as well, to again encourage the timely preparation of these records.
Has there been any collaboration between the Comptroller of Accounts and the permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister with respect to not just the sensitization, but ensuring compliance by the permanent secretaries? And I'm just dealing with the particulars of service and therefore the returns to you so that you could have up-to-date records. And this is all before you retire, because this is how I understand it, that you should have, and it's almost as if the regulations have a built-in fallback, which is you.
No, we have held some discussions, but not on the compliance path for the PSLs.
Okay. And would you say if there were full compliance and you had your own reliable, separate records, that would help the process?
Yes.
Okay. So that what then is the responsibility of the Comptroller of Accounts in ensuring that some proactive steps are taken?
Well, just that. We need to ensure, we train the ministries, send out the circulars, make calls, send memos. When there are outstanding documents, we call the ministries as well as send out memos to ensure that that there is compliance.
Yeah. Have you seen that working? Have you seen results in that?
We have to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. Is that a satisfactory extent?
No.
Okay. All right. So I guess maybe you will want to think of other things that you could try.
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to ask, let me switch a bit to the Auditor General. In terms of, from your perspective, I think you have an initiative to have dedicated staff update pension and leave records of all officers within a 2-year period.
I'm not quite understanding your question.
Okay, when we had looked at your submission, I believe you spoke about there being an initiative where you would have dedicated staff to update the pension and leave records for all officers who would be within 2 years of their retirement date. Is that so?
Within our own department, within our own HR processes?
Yes.
Yes.
So let me ask you, where would be your source of getting that information?
Well, okay, as indicated here, there are issues in terms of if the officer belongs to you and have always belonged to you, like in the audit department, of course, your source of information would be when they come to you from Service Commission and that sort of thing. If the officer has come external from you, they are supposed to work with what is known in the circular as a circulating file, which is supposed to have all their data and records of information on that file. Often the officer comes with a file, but the file is incomplete. And I think our HR unit has recognized that. And so they are looking at corresponding with the relevant ministries to get that sort of information. But I think our HR officer has also indicated that she felt that officers themselves need to take a personal account because you are working with a file that is supposed to represent your record. And perhaps if you take note that your record is incomplete, you could also take that opportunity to try and ensure that your record is complete by the time you reach the ministry. So that's basically what I have to say at this point in time.
So I just want to follow clarification. When you say an officer works with the file, does that mean that the officer actually brings the file, or the file is supposed to be sent by the HR from one to one? Either way. So an officer, because I'm not sure, because I'm shocked to hear that. I didn't know that officers could work with their own files.
It's a circulating file.
I know it's a circulating file. And I understood the circulating file to mean the file follows the officer. From the little committee has been exposed to, we understand that the file sometimes does not follow the officer.
That is correct.
And therefore, the question would have arisen, what could the officer do to ensure that his file follows him? So that I'm surprised to hear that the officer could actually demand his file and work with his file. So he demands his file from whom?
HR office from where he's coming from.
His HR office from where he comes, okay. And therefore, permanent secretary in the office of the OPM, based on what the Auditor General has said, is there a role for you in ensuring that the permanent secretaries comply with this initiative that the Auditor General has created, which I think helps solve some of the absence of information?
Once you have compliance, of course, it will solve the absence of the information. But like I said, the problem is when compliance had not taken place in the past, because there are some things that happened or would have contributed to it. I mean, apart from the persons in the, let us say, the pension and leave department not doing what they're supposed to do on time, there are other things like, for instance, it may not be that persons alone move from one ministry to the next, but that ministries themselves are reconfigured and whole departments move from one ministry to the next. And sometimes when you go back to try to find where that person was at a particular point in time on their records, that particular ministry may cease to exist because it may just have, the different parts may have just been distributed to other ministries. And this is the problem in terms of going back through those records over that extended period of time. Now, if things had taken place correctly at that point in time, you wouldn't have that problem, but you do. And some of it may be you may form a new ministry with new staff, and the person's not sufficiently competent to carry out their duties, and then soon after that ministry it no longer exists, and the records aren't there. And then how do you, and that is what contributes a lot of the backlog, particularly in, there are certain ministries and departments like gender affairs or sport and youth that are very portable and move from one ministry to the next, as opposed to if you worked in finance or auditor general, and that is really, and because you're insisting on that 35 to 40 year record day by day, is the crux of the problem, really.
So let me ask, assuming all is in order, all the pension and leave records, the particulars, terms and conditions of a particular officer, what would be the process time for the computation and authorization for the payment?
Assuming that everything is in order and the information and documents were sent up to 3 months or before time, it would take up to between 4 to 6 months.
4 to 6 months. And is that considered urgent and of high priority?
Yes, it is, but we have to look at these steps in the process. These steps take a while. Auditor General takes sometimes, because of the volume, it takes about 2 months at the Auditor General's department. And at the various areas, a few weeks are taken.
Okay. Is that process much more complicated than paying salaries?
Yes, as P.S. Sweetheart said, there could be complications in the calculations of the pensions.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. All things being equal, you told me 4 to 6 months.
Yes, 4 to 6 months. It could be paid on time, 4 to 6 months, providing also that all the information was sent before.
And I've asked you that you consider that high priority and urgent?
Yes, it's considered high priority.
Okay. Is it during the 4 to 6 months, unless, say, the retired officer has other forms of income, do you still consider 4 to 6 months urgent and of high priority?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to ask the Comptroller, but I have some questions that I want to direct to public administration. Could you share with us at this time what is the outstanding number of pension payments that the Comptroller need to satisfy at this time as we speak? How many? What is the state of the backlog,
Okay.
if there is a backlog?
Yes. Currently, we have approximately 884 payments being processed in the system at various stages, but there are approximately 934 payments requiring outstanding documents from ministries and departments.
So you're talking about 800 that, in terms of computation and authorization, would be at an advanced stage.
Yes, and those will be paid.
And those will be paid.
Yes.
And then is it another 900 that you have some complications in?
Yes, another 900 with various documents outstanding from ministries.
And how long that has been there, the 900 and
various times. It could be 1 month to possibly a year, depending on the nature of the problem from the ministries or the responses from the ministries.
Yeah. In a well-oiled modern public service and a well-oiled and organized Comptroller of Accounts department, a modern electronic platform, what would you say in a modern world the average time should take if you had the necessary software to speed up this process for the ordinary public officer who would have reached his retirement age, and you have gotten all the data in accordance with Regulation 33(1), 3 months in advance? All the data is sent to you 3 months in advance. What is the ideal time that your department would like to have those pension checks issued?
Well, if all the documents are submitted on time and they are accurate, a reasonable time is 1 to 4 weeks with automation and complete information.
Are you working towards the realization of that noble and wonderful objective in terms of between 2 to 4 weeks max?
Yes.
And how is that being? What steps, what measures are being taken to realize that objective? What equipment you would require, and have you made the approach to the appropriate authorities to realize that?
Well, one of the initiatives that we have undertaken with the Ministry of Public Administration, who have acquired a pensions administration software, we are looking right now at sending out an RFI, a request for information, for the pensions administration software, which would be used for the calculation of pensions benefits and the computation of the pensions. So that is one of the initiatives that we are undertaking right now towards computerization.
You know, Madam Comptroller, you know, it's a nightmare for the ordinary public officer to seek information out of the Comptroller of Accounts office just to determine where his or her pension is at. You know, it is like pulling teeth. I myself had my own round of difficulty in that, and I'm not an ordinary, you know, public officer. So I could well imagine what ordinary public officers, you know, have to undergo. So that is why I'm interested, and we are interested in determining how can we assist you and the other agencies to modernize your operations so that we can realize that objective of 2 to 4 weeks. Do you have, I may put this question to Mrs. Sweet. Is it possible for us to establish an electronic platform which is designed to facilitate public officers and contract officers in tracking the progress of their pensions and gratuities? Is there the possibility that we can establish such an electronic platform so I don't have to be calling Comptroller of Accounts to find out where are we with my check, and then you have challenges because of the difficulty in achieving that? Can we move towards establishing some electronic platform to track where people's pensions are at and gratuities?
Well, the answer is yes, you could always design an electronic platform to deal with something like that. I don't know if that was envisaged in the request for information that the Comptroller is looking at in terms of their system. But, I mean, yes, it's possible, but it involves the resources in terms of, well, apart from the hardware and the software and re-engineering your processes. I think one of the things we really need to look at in terms of the way our pension system is currently structured based on the legislation. If we don't really go back to the core, which is the legislation and the way you go about calculating your pensions, and probably start looking at that and addressing your pension reform, you may end up just computerizing a system that is less than ideal. So yes, you can computerize it so that to facilitate those sort of requests like what you are proposing, as well as the accompanying reports in terms of tracking your efficiencies and where things are lagging and flag, etc. But I think you really, the larger problem that will provide the quicker fixes is really that reform of your pension. And that's an issue that at some point in time you'll have to address.
But are you aware of any efforts at this time aimed at achieving that objective, pension reform in the system? Where are we with that? Do you have any ideas? Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, and maybe the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance can also help us? I'll
probably defer to her. I know probably in about late 2005 to 2010 that there were some initiatives on it. And I remember the World Bank, etc., doing several reports and looking at pieces of legislation. But it's in terms of really defining your policy. And of course, you'll appreciate you have a lot of stakeholders and the various bargaining units, etc., that you'll have to deal with, as well as the legacy of those who are currently in the system. How do you treat with it? But I don't know if, in terms of where we are currently in terms of pension reform, I'll have to defer to the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah, the head of the public service is correct. The initiative had started with the World Bank. However, that has not continued within recent time, and we may look at revisiting it, but it's not a current policy measure. All right,
So
but some work had been done on pension reform a few years ago.
So there's no initiative at this material time to deal with pension reforms in Trinidad and Tobago, as far as you are aware?
No, not pension reform. No, not at this time.
Okay. May I ask for the representative from public administration? I know for a fact that there was some partnership with KPMG to conduct training involving ministries, department, and other agencies of the government. And one of the objectives would have been to work towards improving the efficiency in the processing of pensions in the system. Could you indicate to us, as it relates to preparation of pension and leave records, is there any attempt to embark upon any training program in that area for 2018, as far as you are aware?
Member, you are correct. There was a consultancy that took place between the then Ministry of Public Administration and KPMG back in 2015, I believe, 2015 to 2016, to work on what we call a business process management approach to service delivery. And one of the focal points of the consultancy was looking at improving the pensions processing process. There was training conducted during the period. We have over 190 officers across the service who were trained in the BPM methodology. Even though the consultancy ended, we would like to continue training in business process management as an approach to service delivery improvement. We don't have it on our calendar of events for the current fiscal, but it is something that we would like to do. As I indicated, we have a number of officers who are trained in the methodology who can serve as facilitators. But again, no, it's not on our program of training for the current fiscal.
Now, I also am aware that the business process management methodology is designed to be institutionalized across the entire public service. That is what we got from your submission. And that is to be used as a tool aimed at addressing challenges in the delivery of quality services to customers. Would you be able to shed some light with us on this business process management initiative?
Okay, so I hinted to the consultancy that took place back in 2015-16. Just for clarification, what business process management, or BPM, is, it is essentially those activities which an organization may embark upon to optimize existing business processes or to improve those processes according to current needs. So I guess if we were to apply it to the current discussion on the pensions administration process, you could apply BPM methodology to improving the processing of terminal benefits, right? As you indicated, it is the intention, desire of the ministry to have BPM institutionalized across the service, and it is something we'd like to see happen. As you understand, the service is large, and it will take time to have that kind of rollout and have the methodology institutionalized across all ministries. And of course, it's not just for one process, it's for as many processes as possible.
But is there any timeline for this initiative to be rolled out, seeing that the consultancy has come to an end?
Right.
Are we going to re-employ KP?
No, KPMG, there's no intention to re-engage KPMG. As I said, we had over 190 officers across the public service trained in the methodology who can serve, one, as facilitators for subsequent training and as project leads in their own ministries. But as you would appreciate, even though the training ended as recently as 2016, if you would call that recently, given the natural flow of things in the service, those officers may have moved on from where they were at the time to other agencies in different capacities. Some may even be no longer within the public service, because the trainees included both public officers, established persons, as well as contract employees. So we may have lost some of them from some of the aforementioned reasons.
Yeah, but given the potential for doing good in the public service by employing this new methodology, and I'm sure it cost taxpayers some money to bring KPMG here and to train the 192 officers. Are you saying that the goal of institutionalizing this process across the public service is now lost?
I would not say so. The goal remains. There are the challenges that I mentioned just now in terms of where are those officers now. It is not impossible to establish what is the remaining number and their availability to assist in the process. We did develop a bit of a plan for the rollout throughout the wider public service, which we need to revisit. Because even though there will be no cost in the sense of re-engaging a KPMG or some other firm, there will be a cost to mounting training programs, doing orientation sessions, preparing training materials, and so on. So it would really mean at this point in time developing a more formal program for rollout. But it remains something that we desire to do because of its potential.
Yeah, but is there any timeline?
No, I can't. No, we don't have a specific timeline at this point in time.
So we don't know, after all this training, with 192 officers being trained, millions of dollars being spent, I would imagine, for this exercise, or hundreds of thousands, and the drivers of this process is supposed to be the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication. And you are saying to us that we don't have a plan to roll out this even in one or two ministries to see how it is going to work. Because we are in 2018. It ended in 2016.
Yes.
When are we going to get that plan, that process engaged within the public service? At least the ministry ought to be letting us know what are their plans to have this thing roll out. It cannot be business as usual and it's open-ended and we don't know when it's going to start. So that's why I'm asking you. Yes. What is the ministry doing to ensure that this very important initiative is not lost?
Well, remember what I will say again, it remains our desire. I know that a proposal has been prepared or is being prepared for the rollout. I can submit at a subsequent date further details in terms of the timelines and the details, for example, which agencies we probably see as being priority to apply in the short term, the medium term.
How soon you'll be able to supply that to the Secretariat in terms of a written proposal as to when this plan is to be rolled out?
If by the end of May is not too long, that should be reasonable.
I'll leave that up to the chairperson. You also indicated in your submission to us that the ministry has developed a comprehensive proposal for improving the administration of pension and leave process in TNT. Would you want to provide us with some insight on this proposal for improving the administration of pension and leave process in the public service of TNT?
Yes, the proposal that we mentioned in our response is one that is basically an internal document that has not been shared with the rest of the public service. It's something that we have looked at. As I indicated at the start, one of the remit of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication is about process and system improvement. So it is a document that has been developed in-house. It seeks to address a number of issues, and the colleagues here have touched on some of them. Issues relating, one, to the preparation of P&L records within ministries. We would appreciate that the human resource management process is a key contributor to preparing the P&L, to addressing officers' terminal benefits. There are a number of issues related, and I think the head of the public service mentioned some of them earlier with regard to the challenges that realignment of ministries presents in the preparation of terminal benefits, securing officers' records. So the process, the proposal sought to identify all of the major shortcomings, challenges within the system right now, and propose possible solutions, which even includes the items mentioned by the Comptroller of Accounts in terms of improving the electronic processing. So it's wide-based.
And finally, for this round, could you advise us, this draft proposal, is it the intention of the ministry to translate that into a note to be submitted to the cabinet for approval and ultimate through the ministry implementation, or is it going to remain a draft for some period of time? I'm just seeking some clarification from you, because it seemed to have some very rich ideas in that draft. So where are we going with the draft? Are we going to the cabinet with a note for approval and then implementation? Share with us.
Okay, I think ultimately, once we are serious about implementation and moving forward with this much-needed project, it would need funding, and funding would therefore require cabinet approval. So once the project is shared with the brother and sister ministries, I would want to say, because it would involve contribution from a number of the parties represented here today and others, the relevant stakeholder consultation and agreement is obtained, it would be necessary to take it forward to cabinet for consideration.
Do you have a roadmap as it relates to consultation with your various fellow ministries and agencies? Is there a timeline, a rollout plan for this very important exercise to commence so that we can move towards getting cabinet approval?
Well, I can't give you a specific timeline. The document was fairly recently completed. We have basically mentioned that this had some initial discussions with only one agency thus far. But we would certainly, again, given the discussion today and the need to treat terminal benefits as urgent, there's definitely a need to move with some alacrity on this.
So would you be kind enough to submit to us, a written proposal or timeline as to the way forward in terms of consultation with the various ministries? Is that possible?
It is possible. Once back at home we develop the timeline, and so we could submit.
Could I suggest the end of May? Because remember, this is a very urgent matter.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Member Duki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to pose this question to the acting PS, Ministry of Public Administration and Communication. In your opening submission, I believe you mentioned the ministry's role in terms of transformation and reform and assisting ministries and departments in improving their service delivery. But prior to that, if I heard you correctly, you indicated that your role is an incidental one. I want you to explain that to me.
All right. There's an extent to which the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication is a still fairly young ministry. We have not been around as long as the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Health or Education. And whereas the Auditor General's Department and maybe even the Personnel Department can cite their role in the process in statute, I don't believe that the Ministry of Public Administration, well, its current nomenclature is Ministry of Public Administration and Communication, is referenced in statute. By virtue, so that is why I said it's incidental.
So that is what you meant.
Yes,
by
we don't play.
incidental.
P&L records do not come to the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications for calculation of terminal benefits. As a regular line ministerial agency, we have a remit to prepare records for our retiring officers, but we do not play a role in the processing per se of the terminal benefits. That
Right.
hence the incidental comment.
And just to follow up on something Senator Mark alluded to in terms of his questions, this BPM intervention, this took place in 2015.
Yes.
So from 2015 to now, I want to assume that you would have been able to make some sort of assessment in terms of the impact this intervention would have had on the process regarding pensions and gratuity. So tell me how significant this intervention was regarding improving this process to say to us that the intervention of training in this regard is working.
I think what I would have to say is that based on our review of what was done, accomplished during the period of training, we realized that BPM, Business Process Management, has the potential to contribute to system process improvement.
But that's based on what? What have you seen to come to that conclusion?
Okay, it is what we saw at the time. We did do an internal assessment of the project.
So what did you measure? You did say you did an internal assessment. What did you measure?
Now, the BPM project as a whole, the consultancy as a whole, had some specific objectives. And if you don't mind, I'll just run through them quickly. To increase the level of sensitization among stakeholders of the potential contribution of BPM and its usefulness to agencies within the public service. Let me just say that hitherto, the project, BPM was not something that was widespread or pretty well known within the system. So the initiative sought to introduce BPM to the public service. To increase the knowledge of BPM concepts, methodologies, and tools. To increase competencies in modeling existing systems and processes. To enhance the ability to propose appropriate process changes. Enhance the ability to develop BPM implementation plans. So for example, those were the objectives. So to the extent that during the life of the project, we were able to improve participants or persons' knowledge and awareness of BPM methodology, we would say yes. The assessment evaluation indicated that that did happen.
In terms of the objectives you mentioned, I can't repeat it verbatim, but you indicated something which deals with improving the business process.
Right.
Okay, so if I am to focus on that one, would you say that this intervention impacted or contributed to the attainment of that specific objective, which is improving the process?
Right. Again, out of the 192 persons who were trained throughout the life of the project, there were 30 persons drawn from around 5 or 6 agencies who dealt specifically with the issue of pensions improvement.
Right.
Some of the things that the evaluation, the review indicated is that participants were able to identify areas in which improvements could have been made.
Could have been made.
Could have been made. One of the things about BPM is that it advocates an integrated or collaborative approach to system process improvement. So, for example, in the preparation of P&L records, human resource management units and accounting, finance and accounts units need to work closely. So there would have been a recognition that, yes, there is a need for greater collaboration working together between those two units within a ministry. I would highlight those as two of the key outcomes.
So you are confident that the intervention is adding value,
that it can add value.
Okay. And in your response to one of the questions posed by Member Mark regarding the 30 or so employees who were exposed to this specific intervention, I think you said some or a significant amount would have left the service. So that brings me to this question. What are we doing about retention? Because if you're spending significant sums in equipping our employees to improve service delivery and they're leaving, I think it begs the question, if you think that the training is adding value, but the servants are leaving, what are you doing to improve employee retention?
That is a challenging question, member. So, for example, in making the response that you just quoted, as it is right now, the public service, well, when we speak of the public service, sometimes we convey the impression that it may be a single entity that we are referring to. Right. The public service right now is made up of 23 ministries and departments, plus sundry other agencies. None of those agencies are closed shops, in that you do not enter one unless your particular career stream, let us say you're a medical doctor, that you stay in one shop for the lifetime, you're 30 to 35 years. People move, whether promotion, transfers, as the case might be. So it is near difficult or impossible to prevent officers from moving from agency to agency or even intra-agency. So someone may move from an accounts department to an HR to registry, as the case might be. So invariably, there's going to be some loss.
I don't know if I misinterpreted your response when you responded to Senator, well, to Member Mark, of the impression that they would have left the service.
Right, yes, so it is possible, for example, someone who might have been on the training program at the time, let us say the person was 58 years old, they may have been heading a P&L unit, but they were 58 years old. It is possible that the person could have retired by now. I indicated that some of the persons trained were contract officers. A contract may have ended. So that is where I pointed to the fact that persons may have left the service. And in those cases, there is nothing that we could do to prevent their movement out.
Okay, and finally, I don't have to pose this question to the Comptroller of Accounts or the PS, OPM, but I think Madam Chair would guide me. This entire process involves a lot of connectivity among various functions, ministries, and the departments as well. Is there inter-functional team that meets with the specific mandate to examine the whole process of the payment of pension and gratuity as key stakeholders in the entire process? Because, and I'm posing this question in the context of the amount of connection and involvement, because the output of one process becomes the input of another process. And even if a delay in what might seem a small process of a day, the multiplier effect it will have on the entire process. My thinking is maybe if a team is together working on the process continuously, there may be value. So the question really is there such a interfunctional team?
I think I'll take that question. No, well, no, in that there's not a standing committee or standing team dedicated to this specific exercise. But at the same time, it does take place, and part of it is, well, in the comptroller in their normal duties, the Comptroller of Accounts, that is in the normal duties in liaising with individuals and issuing circulars and guidelines, etc. Over different periods of time, they would have, well, training or briefing sessions where they would calling, whether it's permanent secretaries and their on various heads of the relevant section, whether it's HR, etc., to have discussions with them and guiding them through if they're issuing new processes or if it's current processes where they see deficiencies in terms of highlighting these deficiencies and flagging it for permanent secretaries and the relevant section heads. On occasion, the Comptroller of Accounts do meet with the Board of Permanent Secretaries and heads of departments, again, and do presentations, whether it's related to this or other matters. And then there's a forum of the HR, the DPSs, Deputy Permanent Secretaries, as well as Directors of HR, who meet on a monthly basis and discuss this and other matters. But in terms of a dedicated team dealing with this exercise alone, no.
Madam Chair, that's it for now.
P.S., maybe I could just pick up where you ended. In terms of what you're saying is there's some sort of ongoing discussion across the agencies. Have you seen any sort of improvement in the delivery of pensions as urgent and of high priority as a result of this informal but continuous discussion as you've described?
Well, from some discussions that I would have had, as well as looking at some of the documents coming out of the Comptroller of Accounts, I would say yes, there have been some improvements, but it would be like specific ministries, probably when they set up their liaison officers, etc., and depending on the competency of the person and who's carrying out that function. So you're seeing different areas of improvement in terms of overall, and I know from working in the Ministry of Finance previously that the Comptroller has putting some systems within our own shop, trying to deal with some of the bottlenecks, etc. So you're seeing some things and some improvement in how it's processing, but again, we have to keep working at it and finding other ways to address some of the other issues. But there have been some incremental improvements.
Let me just ask the Comptroller. Comptroller, you said that if I, as a public officer, had everything in order, it will take 4 to 6 months. Would you say that in your experience, you would aim, or there's any initiative to get that time shortened, that processing time?
Yes.
And what you would consider, not necessarily ideal, but let's say for the initiatives you've put in place for 2018, and let's say they were in December 2018 and you look back, what sort of period, shortened period, you would think is a satisfactory improvement for 2018?
Up to 3 months.
3 months. And let me ask you, how close you think you are to that?
I can't say offhand.
Okay. So could you look and give us an idea?
Yes.
All right. Now, in terms of the person who we had, the hypothetical person who said, look, they've retired, they have no savings, they have to wait 4 to 6 months. I'd ask you if you felt that that was urgent and high priority, and you said no. In a case like that, would you think that interim some sort of interim payment may help.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that.
PS, you want to assist in that?
Well, I don't want to go in the comptroller shop in terms of the actual processing time. But I wanted to flag that the 3 months in the legislation should be looked at not as the time, but as the minimum period of time to give notice. And therefore, if for instance, if you're able to you have your records and you do your notice earlier, let us say 6 months per se, that 6 months before the time you indicate that you are retiring, because like I said before, we started targeting persons in the 55 to 60 age group, etc. It means, therefore, let us say it takes 6 months to process, but if you gave a 6-month notice, then it's possible that the month following when you stop receiving salary, you can receive your pension. So that is another way of also looking at addressing the same problem.
So I guess the Comptroller of Accounts is on the same page with you with respect to that. Because I didn't hear that coming from the Comptroller of Accounts, so that's what I'm trying to find out. From the Comptroller's perspective, what initiatives she sees that will get up, we're looking back December 18 to 3 months, and I take the 3 months to mean not 3 months notice. I thought you were saying 3 months to process and authorize for payment. I think that's what we're talking about, right? So that I'm trying to find out what she thinks that she's doing now as initiatives to get her at December 2018 to a 3-month timeline for processing, computation, authorization for payment if I had everything in my file in order.
Going back to these 3 months, I also meant providing we did get everything before time, up to 3 to 6 months before time, then it would be possible to get it paid on time.
You mean that was the underlying assumption?
That was the underlying assumption.
Okay, so that we have already begun to put things in place to get ministries to not use the 3 months as the moving factor, but to say a minimum of 3 months.
Yes, so we always tell ministries from between 6 months to a year.
Okay, so let me ask something. Do you, in any of the ministries or departments, does anybody undertake to say, as of December or January, let's just say January 1st, 2018, advise the Comptroller of Accounts, all the people you expect to retire within this year and the dates of retirement? Anybody does that?
Well, we have in our circular that we issued, we gave that undertaking to the ministries.
If maybe you could expand a little more so that I could understand.
Oh, sorry. Meaning we had given some timelines to the ministries and departments to collate information pertaining to persons who were retiring, to collate that information and get the information from the pertaining to the officers to the Treasury Division. Sorry.
So would that be the same information that you would require to compute their gratuity and pension?
It would be information pertaining to the pension and leave records.
Okay, but what I'm trying to find out is, and it's really as a sort, acting as an alert, right? Not so much sending in the information, but acting as an alert. If anybody is saying, as of the 1st of say, January 2018, submit to me all the names and positions of employees in your ministry who will be retiring in this fiscal year or this calendar year or the next 2 calendar years. That's what I'm trying to find out. And who does that?
Well, that would be the responsibilities of the permanent secretaries of the ministries.
Right. And the permanent secretary is expected to do that in their ministry. To send information to whom? You? Is that what is in the circular?
To send the information, yes, to us.
And you said that would have gone on in the circular in December last year? Mm-hmm. What kind of response have you got?
I'm not sure, but I don't think the responses are forthcoming.
You don't think the responses were forthcoming?
No.
So if I were to say to you that by December 31st of this year, in 32 of the 39 ministries and departments, 865 people were retiring. Would that be so, or would that not be so, or it sounds likely, or you don't know?
Yes, that's likely.
That's likely. So that could you, within a week from today, send me what your figure says to see if it tallies with this hypothetical figure that I've said, or if it's close to that,
yes.
And which ministries.
Okay.
Okay? All right. Now, in terms of the person, the hypothetical person who we said who's retired and has nothing, and has to wait 4 to 6 months, and that's the one who we're assuming everything is in order, right? And which you conceded that would not be urgent, that would not be high priority, and of course the conclusion of that is that's in breach of the regulation. Would you think interim payments would assist in that kind of scenario?
Well, there was some initial discussions on interim payments, but we still need to engage all the relevant stakeholders, look at the implications, any legal implications, and the pros and cons of undertaking that initiative.
So how long ago was this initiative considered or conceptualized?
Well, I understand it was undertaken before my time. Sorry,
and
I understand it was something that came up. There were discussions, but...
And without disclosing your age, before your time will be as, before what?
Sorry, no, before probably 2014.
Before 2014. What has happened to it between 2014 and 2018? As a discussion, as a consideration, as something to explore?
It hasn't, but it would have to be a policy decision from the Ministry of Finance.
Has to be a policy decision from the Ministry of Finance. Okay. So that, is it being actively considered? Or is it just lying dormant? I don't know. Maybe the acting permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance could help us with that.
Chair, we will have to follow up on that with you. We will have to check with our internal legal and see if that matter has reached them. If not, we would have to develop a sort of a policy paper so that all the implications may be taken into consideration.
So I may just ask you then, acting permanent secretary, Ministry of Finance, without committing you to anything, does that sound as something that is plausible?
Yes, Chair, it sounds feasible. Once the interim payment does not result in an overpayment. All right, but yes, that is something that has would provide a lot of relief to public servants who have been waiting a significant amount of time for their pensions.
Okay. So could I therefore, and I understand that as a big con, right? The overpayment must be the most obvious big con, right? Could I therefore maybe get some sort of, I don't want to put as much as an obligation as an undertaking, but could I get some sort of, I guess I can't use another word, undertaking from you all, that this is something that you all could actively explore and let us know. And I would say if we're in the month of April, I would say certainly by the end of June, some sort of framework could be considered to say this is something we could go forward on, or no, this is something we can't go forward on. and let us know so that this is not something that will take another 4 years lying there as maybe something that can be done, but can't even be explored.
Of course, Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, so I want to therefore just shift some of the discussion to the Permanent Secretary, no, the CPU. I don't know if you could share some light for me on this circulating file. And if not you, anybody. The circulating file only has as a public servant, my information regarding where I worked and my salary and increments. Would it only have that? Let me ask. Head of the Public Service, do you have a circulating file?
I've never seen my circulating.
How come? Haven't you moved? I think I've last knew in the Ministry of Finance.
Yes, well, I assume that it went from my...
You didn't take it with you?
No, I never.
Why?
Well, part of the problem...
I'm sure you have a good reason. I don't want to know the problem. I want to know why you didn't take it with you.
No, I'm going to say... I'm going to explain why I wouldn't take it with me.
No, why didn't you take it with you?
Because I'm not aware of a circulating file and the need for I as a public officer to take it. And I just wanted to say...
Thank you very much. Just now, everybody will get a chance. Ms. Liban, have you always been at the Treasury? Yes. You've always been at Comptroller of Accounts?
Yes.
Okay, so your circulating file, you've seen it?
Yes, it's...
You have accessed to it?
Yes.
Yeah. Miss CPU, because in the little time I've seen you in every place. Do you have a circulating file?
I would assume so, ma'am.
All right. Did you take it with you to CPO?
No, I didn't.
Are you aware you could have taken it with you to CPO?
No.
Okay.
I thought it was an HR function and that would happen.
Okay. All right. So let me ask, Mr. Acting Permanent Secretary, do you have a circulating file?
Cautiously, I expect so, ma'am.
Okay, so based on your caution, I would think that you didn't take it with you to the Ministry of Public Administration.
No, I did not.
All right. So, have you all learned today that you can go and get it from the last place you've gone and taking it with you to where you go? Huh? No, I'm serious, because if you all don't know, who knows?
And that's what I wanted to intimate, that the HR system is so complicated that you expect. I remember when the Auditor General was talking about officers ought to do this and what, and my initial thought hearing that discussion was how many officers would be aware, especially you have a wide range of officers. That's
and you mean you didn't
them.
express that thought until I extracted it from you? No, I'm serious in terms of this. What does a circulating file have on it? Who knows? Who knows? And could you all allow the person who knows to speak?
Madam Chair, in the circulating personal file would have...
Because we're in the back here, so we can't see. I know you were introduced, but maybe if you could just say your name and your position so that will help us.
Madam Chair, good afternoon. I am June Bell, Director, Human Resource Services of the Auditor General's Department. A circulating personal file has the history of that officer from the time they would have started in the service to the time they would have left that ministry or department. It would also include information with respect to promotions, increments,
infractions. Infractions.
Correct. And what else? No pay leave, whatever leave, maternity leave, extended sick leave, all that information is incorporated in a circulating personal file.
So that my circulating file that may have a record of my infractions, etc., is made available to me and put in my hand?
Yes, it can be, because speaking from a personal point of view, I went to the audit. I assumed that the Auditor General's department from the Attorney General's department. And when I left, just as they give you the salary and leave particulars, I did not get it in my hand at that time, but within about a week, they contacted me and it was forwarded.
Okay, can I ask how common is that practice?
It is not as common as it's supposed to be, Madam Chair.
And might I also ask, with respect to how common it's supposed to be, isn't there a possibility of some sort of, I don't want to use such a lovely word, but reorganization of my file? Couldn't that possibly happen?
Yes.
Chair, might I add that the circulating file is going with you for inputting into the ministry in which you're going or the department in which you're going. But the information that is inputted in the circulated file it is a copy of what is in your personal file, your PDF file, and those confidential files. And those files are not circulated with you when you go.
So therefore, what is the problem if you say that I can have my own copy done by you going with me, but you can't, as an HR, send it on alongside me? What is the difficulty?
The reason sometimes that, I'm just speaking out of turn here, but I believe sometimes what happens is the information may not be totally up to date in any of your circulating file, and therefore it needs to be updated and fixed prior to your departure and going to another ministry and transferring. I would also want to add, I am old in the service, so my circulating file would have information from me from when I started the IRIS system coming on board. But a lot of the information for an officer who has come into the service when the IRIS system came into being, a lot of that same information would be embedded in the IRIS system because you've inputted that data. The IRIS system inputs the data of your promotions, all of those sorts of things is in the IRIS system. But it is more complicated in this era for officers like myself, because our system was a manual system at that point in time, and the circulating file is really supposed to have all the records of our whole history of work service that we've had in the public service and go with us.
The controller is, if I were one of those people who I kept my records, so I have my own personal records, so I have my own personal file on me, and I were ready to retire, would you act on my file?
I would need to verify the information.
And if the information were missing in the various ministries, then what happens?
Then they would still have to go back to the ministries to get those periods.
Okay.
But as far as I'm aware, the circulating personal file is a confidential document.
Thank you very much.
It should be sent to the ministry and not walked with the persons.
I thought that's what happened, but it seems that even among us, we're not agreed. And that's why I asked Ms. Bell how common it is, because the information we have is that your circulating file is a confidential file.
Yes, it is.
So maybe among y'all, the discussion needs to start from all those very simple things. Now, what I'm saying is, if I have my own circulating file, not what anybody did for me, I do it for myself. Because everywhere I go, I take a copy and I have every pay record, every pay slip I ever got. And all my TD forms, I have copies of everything in the 33 and the 30 years I worked there. And ministries don't have it. Then what?
Well, once the information has been certified, such as the P&L records, we can use it.
What happens if 6 months pass and it ain't certified?
Well, we will have to get it certified by the internal audit.
What you're getting certified? My records?
Well, if it's the P&L pension and leave records.
The personal ones I have or the ones you can't find? What we waiting on to be certified? That's what I want to know.
Okay, well, if they can't find it and you have a copy, it still needs some sort of verification on that record.
Who verifies it? You take it from me and get it verified?
We can ask the ministry to verify the information.
But we've been asking the ministries and they can't produce. So what are you asking them to verify? The copies that I have or to continue digging to find it? That's what I want to know.
No, well, if they can verify the copies, at least stamp or
so you will
sign
take the copies from me or I go to the ministries with it? I want to know because they have somebody out there that have all their suitcases with their everything. So I want to know what to tell them. I want them to hear.
Okay. But we can take the information and we can send. Okay. The person is from the particular ministry.
I am a public servant.
Yes.
I work 33 and a third years in all the ministries. I'm retiring. You are missing some of my pension and leave information and so on. I have copies of everything. First I asked you, can you work on my copies? You said they have to be verified. You go back to the ministry. The ministry has to verify. What I want to know is, would you work on what I have to have it verified?
Yes, we could have it verified.
So that I could give you copies and you will have it verified.
Yes, yes.
How long is that likely to take?
It would vary depending on, well, how long is
so it could be indefinite, right? Would there therefore be a cutoff period? You know, like how in law we have like a statute ban and that kind of thing? Would there be a period when you say, look, 6 months pass, 18 months pass, I hear from the ministry are going on what Ms. George says she has?
Well, we would try to get the information from the ministry.
You wouldn't. So if it takes 10 years, I'll have to wait. No. I might be being ridiculous, but it will have to wait till such time.
No, but there are instances where if a period of service is missing and the employee agrees, we would make the payment minus that period of service.
Okay, all right.
Interim.
So you'll make it minus that period of service. And therefore, again, what cutoff period then that you either surrender to my records or you, and you say, well, okay, I'll pay on your records, or you say, well, look, you just wait till whenever.
I'll have to, as far as I'm aware, there is no cutoff period.
There's no cutoff period. Okay. All right, so, Member Mark.
Thank you. I wanted to ask my colleague from Public Administration. This People's Soft Enterprise Pension Administration Software module, you have stated that it will facilitate the automation of the calculation and processing of pension and gratuities. You want to shed some light on this particular software for us?
Member, I think that information came from the Comptroller of Accounts in her response to an earlier question.
Oh, that is the Comptroller came from Comptroller?
Yes.
All right, Comptroller, could you share with us?
I wouldn't have details on the software, but that is what we are looking to do, to implement.
That is separate from the BMP, Business Process.
Yes.
It's a new software.
Yes.
And any idea when that will come on stream? Or just an idea that you're exploring?
We are undertaking the initiative right now. We are sending out a request for information for costing for the implementation of the software. After which we need to do a note to cabinet for the approval of the costing and the project, and that should take place in June this year.
Any idea as to what are the benefits we will derive from this, the application of this and implementation of this software ultimately?
Well, it would speed up the processing of the pensions calculations, providing all the information is on the system.
Okay. All right. Comptroller, you said that your ideal number of personnel in that section of your division that deals with pensions supposed to be about 112, am I wrong?
Yes.
And at the moment, you have about 87? Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you get the balance, would that reduce the time in terms of the 4 to 6 months that you had given us earlier, or would that be included if you have your ideal number?
Well, it is expected to also reduce the time frame.
And what efforts are we making to kind of speed up that?
Well, we have completed a draft note, which we are reviewing right now, and we would submit it to the Ministry of Public Administration. We are looking at May to submit, and then onward to Cabinet.
Okay. And the Auditor General, may I ask, I realize that based on your submission, you do have some challenges because that section of the Auditor General's department that would deal with pension and leave records and to verify same, you are saying that you only have about 12 persons?
That is correct.
In that department or unit. And therefore, there are you suffer from staff shortages, right?
That is correct.
Now, could you tell us what is the ideal staff complement if you are to really address the amount of applications that you get for verification and ultimate approval?
We are the second verification process that comes to us. And so basically for us, we would verify what has already been looked at by the internal auditors and then looked at by the Comptroller of Accounts staff. So invariably, a number of the queries that may come to us would already be addressed. But for us, we have a significant amount of files, mainly from national security, that come directly to us. And that actually has impacted on our time frame. And so with the resource, I can't give you an exact number because I'm not an HR specialist. But I'm just looking at the challenges in terms of the volume of things that come to us direct from certain entities. Because if you saw in my submission, at least 1,000 to almost 2,000 files come to us directly, directly for us, which therefore would not have gone through the very much verification process from the other entities. Okay. I would wish to say that in some instances, we're not quite clear as to why those files come to us directly without going through the Comptroller of Accounts. We have sought to try to ascertain where that practice has, and we have not been able to ascertain that to date. But that also has impacted on our capabilities as well.
But what would you want to suggest be done to end this practice? Because the Comptroller of Accounts pension management branch is supposed to be the centralized agency within the broad Ministry of Finance framework that would do the processing once the computation has been done.
Senator Mark, if you will look at the legislation under which this is being done, we are auditors.
Right.
And we are supposed to be auditing in accordance with the Exchequer and Audit Act and the Constitution. You will note that our responsibility is defined for us in the Civil Service Act and as replicated, as I said, in those other acts. Therefore, what they have done is position the audit office in basically what is ostensibly an HR function. And we have been advocated, and we have spoken at times, we have spoken to the then Director of Public Administration, Ms. Creed. We have spoken to, we have had discussions with the Attorney General's office as to how we can be removed from this process and let us be what we are supposed to be, and that is auditors. And that would alleviate a level that may not necessarily need to be there. That is a discussion that we have been having, and we have not reached I don't know if our legal officer, because we're looking at it from that legal point of view. Ms. Coburn, you want to add anything to this point in time?
No, not at this time.
Yeah. But basically, that is a level that has to be looked at as to whether or not the Auditor General needs to be intimately involved in what is ostensibly an HR function, or let us do what we are supposed to do, an audit under in accordance with the Exchequer and Audit Act. So that is a discussion that also needs to be had. So when you ask me about the number of personnel that should be involved, I would respond is to, do we really need to be involved? But if we are presently needed to be involved, then at least we would need to have at least 10 more officers than what we have at present. We utilize audit officers, and that takes away from our resources that we need to do our normal work under the Constitution and under the Exchequer and Audit Act. In order to do that, we also utilize temporary clerical staff in order to facilitate the processing of some of these pension and leave records and computations. And we also utilize retirees. That is what we've had to do in order to advance the process forward. I hope I've answered your question to some degree.
Yeah, this is clearly an anomaly, because I'm seeing from the data that you have provided to us, in the short space of a year, you have almost 1,549 applications coming from the Defense Force, police, fire, and the prison service. All of these people come directly
That's
to
correct.
you?
Yes, sir.
But how long this practice has been going on, madam?
I cannot answer you that, but I know it was before my time, and I'm old.
Wow, wow, it's a long time.
Yes, it is a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time, but clearly and so on. So you, the Auditor General, works closely with the Comptroller on this matter?
Yes, we do. We work close. We work together. I know one of the questions were raised before as to the liaison relationship that exists. So there is an informal relationship between the Comptroller of Accounts and the Auditor General's Department. We liaise with the Director of Pensions very closely. We have, when we have issues, we've had meetings to resolve certain differences and to come to an agreement as to how we would approach certain things. So yes, there is that communication between the Auditor General's Department and the Comptroller of Accounts.
But have you all discussed this anomaly to see how it could be addressed, either legislatively or otherwise?
Speaking about the anomaly with the police department.
Yes, that Defense Force and police.
We have not taken it forward in a formalized manner, no, sir.
So you all are happy with it?
No, we're not.
Well, then something has to be done. So what would you like to recommend to this committee that be done? Because it is, in fact, affecting your core duty and responsibility as the Auditor General's Department, with the responsibility of auditing.
I know the Auditor General himself has always advocated that we would like not to be part of the HR process in any of these matters. And so we had liked to have had discussion in how we could go about in approaching and amending the legislations, and which is basically regulations in most instances, to allow us not to be part of the verification process and to tie us in with the Comptroller of Accounts. Because if you read 33.2, in the same breath that they mention the Comptroller of Accounts, they're also mentioning the Auditor General's Department. So basically, this is the approach that the Auditor General would love to have support. And I don't know if the committee would be able to facilitate us in that area.
It's a very, I wasn't aware of that until you brought it to our attention that you were dealing directly, or the Defense Force came directly to you.
Defense Force, Fire, the Fire Services Department, the Police Service Department, the Prisons Department, all theirs come directly to us, yes.
Yes.
And I also believe the municipal corporations as well, they also come directly to us as well. Yeah, that is the Arima, San Fernando, Port of Spain, Point Forte.
And
they come directly.
And what about the daily rated workers? They come to you as well?
Yes, they do.
So daily rated workers?
But they come through the Comptroller of Accounts.
The daily rated workers come through you?
They come to us, but through the Comptroller of Accounts.
Come to you, okay. I just wanted to ask the Ministry of Finance, the Permanent Secretary, the formulas or formulae that would be used to address pensions, right? Either on reduced or reduced pension and gratuity. On the question of the formulas, Acting Permanent Secretary, how reasonable would you say these formulas are in computing pension and gratuity in the public service? The current formulas that they have for pensions and gratuity.
Member, if you don't mind, I can ask the Comptroller to look at that question, please.
Yes, thank you.
These formulas would have been in accordance with the relevant act, the Pensions Act.
But has the ministry ever thought of revising or looking at this, revisiting the formula? No, I'm asking that even though it is in the Act, is there any intention on your part to revisit or revise for consideration by the government of TNT the formulas?
No, there was no intention there.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll pause at this time.
Member Duki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Regarding the formula that Mr. Member Mark alluded to, in terms of computing the pension figure, two pieces of information required would be the months of service and the last 3 years' salary. Am I correct? So what other pieces of information are needed to compute the pension figure for an employee? This is all you need?
Well, this is one of the most commonly used formula, but you have different pieces of legislation affecting pensions, such as legislators, judges, ambassadors, and each of those would require a different calculation.
But this formula is well, if I interpret your submission correctly, is the most commonly used formula. Mm-hmm. So my interpretation of this is that it applies to most of the employees.
Yes, but it would depend on the information from the pension and leave records. And that is where the problem lies. Sometimes the information is incomplete.
And that resides where? In the
with
ministries?
the relevant ministries.
So the traffic jam is really in the ministries and departments?
Yes, and for the pension and leave records.
So therefore, in solving this problem, the focus has to be on the operations which take place there.
Yes, in the pension and leave units. Yes.
So you're saying that once this information is available, the outcome of calculating the pensions and ensuring payments are made is a simple process after that?
Yes, once all the information is there. But there are also other problems, such as wrong incremental dates, unutilized leave. Those are the things that will have to be amended on a pension and leave records.
But that has to deal with documentation at the level of the ministry.
Yes.
So therefore, if you get the process of documentation right at the level of the ministry, is it fair to assume that the outcome of that would reduce significantly the time it takes to deliver pension checks to pensioners?
Yes.
So having regard to that, if we assume that we have identified a problem regarding documentation, at a particular source, then what are the interventions necessary now to bring relief to this particular situation? Because if I'm hearing you correct, we have identified the problem. We know where the problem exists. Then the next discussion in my mind has to be, what are the solutions? So I don't know if some thoughts could be shared on that.
Again, it would lie with the permanent secretary, the responsibility of the permanent secretary of the relevant ministries to ensure that those things are taken into consideration. There's timely and accurate preparation of the pension and leave records for submission to the Comptroller of Accounts.
If I may, the issues in terms of processing the pensions and the timely processing is really, as you identified, stem from the HR record keeping throughout the service. The thing that, and it sounds like it's simple fix. If it was simple, it would have been done already.
I'm not at all saying it's simple. I'm saying
that is the crux of the matter. And I just wanted to probably put some of the things that why it continues to linger. One, it's the persons who have to do the job and whether they are familiar with the different processes and what they need to actually do. Then when you train those persons and then they themselves are transferred and go to another department and you have to retrain them. So you have personnel issues. The other thing that impacts upon it, it's you have a central agency, the Service Commissions Department, dealing with when persons are appointed, when they're promoted, whether they're acting in a position, when they're incremental, and all these, well, little things, for want of a better word, impact upon the accuracy of the records, and that is what is causing the problem. And then when you go back into ministries that persons moved or the ministries themselves move or reconfigured, and you're always in a manual record keeping problem, that is the issue. I think we had talked about the IRIS system, which was meant to address some of these. There are some challenges in terms of the system, but again, that only addresses the issue with when it was implemented, but you still have some of persons who predated the introduction of the IRIS. So yes, you are correct. The computations of the pension stem from the record keeping coming out of the various HR units and different ministries and departments.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that having identified that, and you would have just alluded to some of the challenges, therefore the next step in the discussion, I'm not talking about for here, has to do with how do we address those issues, because it seems to me that if those issues are addressed successfully, it will significantly reduce the amount of time it takes to give the pensioner something that he or she would have worked for and would need at a specific point in time with urgency. That's it, Madam Chair.
Thanks. A final question. CPO, Madam CPO, the issue of increments and how that could impact on one's benefits in terms of pensions and gratuity. I know that is a major challenge. Could you share with us what is the process and how long should it take to determine increments in the public service? You can share that with us?
I can share as much as I am aware of. In the regulations, it's clearly stated when you should get an increment, when you'll qualify for an increment. And if everything goes well, that should not be an issue. The issues may come up if you're acting in different positions and your incremental date for each position is a different thing. And basically, the ministries and departments can work it out. If they have issues, they would write to the personnel department to request assistance in determining the incremental date. So our role, yes, it's in the legislation, but it's clear in the legislation what you're supposed to do. So if you have an issue, you would come. So we would only deal with requests for clarification on determination on incremental dates and that kind of thing from ministries and departments.
So like the Comptroller of Accounts, like, do you find that is a major problem impacting upon, let's say, public officers from receiving their pensions on a timely basis, that matter of increments being outstanding, and therefore they have to await approval, calculation, determination before they can finalize what their terminal benefits ought to be ultimately? Do you find that to be a challenge that you are faced with as the Comptroller?
It is one of the factors, but in addition to that, they are also wrong. The ministry may have calculated the person at a wrong incremental date, at a wrong incremental point, and that would have meant a wrong salary going forward. So then you would have to go back to adjust the salaries for those back years, for increments.
Yeah, and how many people you would say would be impacted upon with those kind of errors or difficulties? You think it's a large number?
I wouldn't be able to say.
You wouldn't be able to say. But I have here where you said about 1,900 persons are awaiting pensions. Of course, you told me earlier it was about 800, just under 900, and another 900 and something that outstanding because they have a number of issues to be resolved. That 900 or close to 1,000 among them would be persons who are experiencing challenges in the area that I've mentioned?
Yes.
Incremental? Yes. And you would not have worked out in a matrix format what are the key issues that would be impacted upon the 1,000 persons? So you could say, well, look, out of the 1,000, 50 of them have outstanding increments still to be calculated, and it is taken maybe a year before that could be done, or it's outstanding for the last, 8 to 10 months, as the case may be.
No, and this is mainly because our system is a manual system where all the information is on a person's file. Okay. We would have memos that we would have written to the ministries requesting those bits of information.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. CPU, I think, having regard to the discussion with the increments, I just really wanted to focus on the contract officers. But looking at what was said with increments, I think I would want to say is beyond challenge that CPU has an important role in the processing, maybe not in the computation, but in the processing of pensions. I also would want to say when it comes to contract employments that CPU also has an important role. And I really wanted to open the discussion with respect to the terms, the settlement of terms and conditions of contracted officers. And I've seen that there are about some 1,900 people, contracted officers, still awaiting settlement of their terms and conditions. And I'm wondering what is being done to address this.
Okay. That 1,900 is a figure going from 15 to current. So what the department has done, going back to 2013, is we tried to standardize some positions. We have a listing of those positions, which would be like communications, legal, clerical positions like business operation assistants, where it will be set what the salary is. So the ministries and departments who have persons employed on contract in those positions will no longer have to come to the personnel department to get those terms determined. So having set aside those, we are now in a position where we're looking at some other positions where we would standardize those as well. But basically, every other position will have to come to the personal department with a request for terms. Even if a salary is fixed for a position, when a person is hired in the position, the ministry still has to come back for the terms for that particular person. And we have been getting, based on the information I have, requests where the ministries are now sending in requests for persons who are nearing the end of their contract. Now, we are dealing with contract employees throughout the entire public service. So as you see, the number is large. So we have also put into place a contract unit where they will look at all the terms, not just salary or terms and conditions. They will look at all the terms, salary and other terms, and when that is finalized and that contract unit can be signed off by the appropriate levels in the organization, that will be issued. So that should speed up the process. As I say, we are looking at some other term positions to standardize, which would also assist. But we also have our staffing challenges. I think that was made very public recently. So we are looking at how we can try and get some more technical persons on board and maybe increase the size of the contracts unit to see how we can speed up the process.
Let me ask you, in terms of this standardization, and this is a very pointed question, I see some of the common positions are like clerk, stroke, secretarial. Would the clerks at the table for the parliament be under the standardized position for clerk, secretarial? And if you don't have that, you could always send to me that in writing.
No, I was just confirming the answer is no.
The answer is no. Okay, thank you. Now, in terms of, I see that there are, you all have certain trade disputes coming out of challenges to your rulings on terms and conditions. I see that there should be about 5 that exist currently. At what stage are they?
Can I ask my Director of Benefits to see if she can assist in this, please?
That matters with our Legal Services Division, and I don't have that in time.
Okay. So that, could you undertake to supply that to us in writing?
Yes, ma'am.
And lastly, I wanted to ask about, I see there was consideration of an initiative for the payment of gratuities for contract workers by their departments. Where is that initiative? What stage has that reached?
Can I ask my colleague, Comptroller of Accounts, to...
This is an initiative that we have undertaken to decentralize the payment of contract gratuities to the ministries and departments. Because we are looking at volumes, we get approximately 3,000 contract payments to process every year. And we just check the calculations and send it back and make the payments. That's what we normally do.
So the whole processing will be done by the particular department or ministry, and what you all will do is just a verification and then authorization. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. No. What we do, what happens currently,
yes,
is their HR units would prepare the contract payments. They would do the calculation, send it to the Treasury Division, to the pensions branch, for checking and for payment
Right. So this initiative eliminates what?
It eliminates time taken to check a contract payment and to pay. If you decentralize it to all the various ministries, then they would be allowed to do their own, make their own payments.
Yeah, but they would do the check-in.
Yes, but yes.
Yeah, because basically what you do is checking.
Yes.
And payment.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What happens then to that sort of oversight, which will not be done if it's decentralized?
Okay. Well, we would be doing it in phases. First of all, we would issue a circular with guidelines for the ministries. We also have our officers who would be in contact with the ministries on the various issues. But the contract payments is really it's a simple calculation, 20% of the gross amount for the years that they have worked. Additionally, some of the errors are very simple errors. For example, a stamp is missing, a signature is missing. Apart from that, there's sometimes non-adherence to CPO guidelines, which is in the CPO circular. So those are some of the errors that the ministries make, and we would be liaising with them on those issues.
But it wouldn't be an issue if you don't know about it. Currently, what exists is as if you have an oversight function, okay? So that, I don't know what the CPO errors are, but it may have idea that you have said non-adherence to CPO directives, and you've distinguished that from the simple ones like a stamp missing and a signature missing. I would then want to assume that those are important errors. If you remove your oversight over that, then who takes the responsibility? Because if I am doing it and I don't have committed an error, then there's nothing for you to liaise with me on. So what happens to that function?
Well, we also had discussions with the Auditor General. We also had discussions with the Auditor General Department where we discussed also at some point the Auditor General conducting audits on these contract payments.
That was after the fact? Real time? When would that happen? That would be after the fact. So it still, in my respectful view, does not replace the function that you are currently undertaking. Now, let me ask one other thing.
Chair, that's, sorry. That's an important point. We really do need to take that into consideration. That's an important internal control that we need to build into this new initiative that we're working on.
And therefore, that's why the initiative has not been.
Yes, I think we really do need to work out the system of internal control for the ministry.
Okay.
And see what will the role be for the Comptroller of Accounts.
Thanks. Might I just ask something to the Comptroller of Accounts? How much does that free you up if that role of, that control role is removed from you? How much does that free you up?
Well, we do, as I mentioned before, we do have about $3,000 to process to pay every year, so that would reduce.
Yeah, but in terms of number of employees, in terms of man hours, how much will that free you up?
But as I said, it would reduce the time taken.
And I really want, if you could, and maybe you can't do it yet, but because I guess you'll have a mapping process, yes. If you could say to us, that will provide us with 10 more man hours a month. That will therefore translate in something that I think somebody could grapple with and understand. But to say it will give you more time, I'm not sure it communicates something to us real. And it may give you more time, but I think unless you could quantify that time, I might have more time, but it doesn't necessarily mean I produce more. But if I know you have 10 more hours in the day, you can then calculate how much more you can do in that 10 hours. So I would suggest that, maybe while the Ministry of Finance is looking at internal controls, Comptroller of Accounts could also be looking to tell us the impact in a real tangible sense the decentralization will bring to the processing of not just the gratuity, but will also free you up to do your other functions. Okay? And one more question to Member Bar.
Yeah. I just want to consolidate what the chairman is saying. Madam PS of Finance and Comptroller. Remember, the end result or the objective that we are after is ensuring that public officers, when they leave the system, they are able to collect their gratuities and their pensions within a reasonable time frame. Not what we are hearing today. Some people are taking a year, some 8 months, some 12 months, some 15 months. People should get theirs within a 2-week to 4-week period max, once things remain equal and we put systems in place. So if we are going to have an initiative to decentralize the payment of contract gratuities, then the ministry should be able to submit to us how will that translate, as the chairman is saying, in the reduction in the waiting time for the public officer to receive his or her pension at the end of the day. I think we ought to get that in some documented form, if that is to make sense. And apart from the internal controls that you have mentioned, that you have to put in place, so you don't have a slush fund being established, or you don't have people taking advantage of the system because we do not have the necessary oversight that the comptroller used to once have. And secondly, I would like to ask you and the comptroller, we still have this archaic, outdated system where a retired public officer has to present to the Comptroller of Accounts a life certificate to indicate that I am not dead, I'm alive. I mean, I said that is outdated. And we, at the level of a joint select committee, we have introduced, and the Minister of Finance has agreed, that in the case of the NIS system, you have a linkage with the Registrar General's Department death certificate area. So you would be able to link with them to determine who is alive and who has passed on, rather than somebody having to come to the comptroller every so often, 6 months, to announce to the comptroller through a certificate that I'm alive. I believe that there's something has to be done to address that system, and I think that comptroller should take a page out of the book of the NIS or NIB and see if we could get the Minister of Finance to agree to a similar system for retirees within the public service. Those are the two areas I'd like to put to you, and the second one in particular, if I could have your input on.
We have already undertaken that initiative, and we are liaising with the Registrar General's Department and the National Insurance Board on making this happen.
You have any idea, Madam Comptroller, when that initiative could bear fruits, or fruit rather, at the end of the day, or would be successful?
The next life certificate cycle is in October this year.
Yes.
It was in April already, so we are looking at having it. We are hoping that it is ready by then, the system.
By October. Thank you very much.
It's now 5:15, and I want to thank the officers of the Ministry of Finance, the Auditor General, the Personnel Department, the Office of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication, and I'm not going to commit the same mistake twice, and the Comptroller of Accounts, for coming and participating in this very interesting conversation. It's an issue that you all know better than us. A lot of retired public servants really feel the brunt of what may appear to be delays. And because time is a moving thing, someday some of us will reach there. So I guess we have to fix it, even if it's just for selfish reasons. Okay, in anticipation of us getting there. So I want to thank you for the conversation. There are some other questions that time hasn't permitted that we explore with you all today. but the Secretary of the committee will forward those questions for written response. The matters that we've asked you all to give us some further assistance with, the Secretary will also remind you all in writing. Again, I say thank you. I wish you all a successful conversation among yourselves in terms of seeing how you all collaborate more with your limited resources, human, money, and everything, because we all know that the world is not perfect, but I think the world demands that we do better through the imperfection. So I want to thank you all again. Safe journey home. I want to thank the listening public and the members of the media who followed this discussion with us today. Pleasant evening. Good night. I now bring this meeting to an end.
Thank you.